All right, welcome to the show, everybody. Ross, Planet X Films, have an epic power panel today for Zodiac 2007. It is a crime mystery film about the Zodiac killer, late 1960s. We've got Ned, BlackBox Online Radio, basically the voice of some of the new interviews on the Zodiac Killer channel. We've got Michael Morford, a.k.a. Morf, Zodiac Speaking Podcast, formerly ZodiacKillerSite.com, currently ZodiacKiller.net. Hope I got that right for you, Morf.
Yep.
Let's start off with Morf. Just give them all your projects, podcasts, where to find you and your research.
Yeah, I host a podcast, Zodiac focused, called Zodiac Speaking, which I co-host with Richard Grinnell. I also have a slew of other true crime podcasts, Criminology, The Murder of My Family, a handful of other ones. You can find me usually on Twitter. I have all around handle, which is at True Crime Guy, or you can also find me on my Zodiac specific, which is Zodiac Killer Net on Twitter.
Absolutely, and the book that's Criminology Presents the Zodiac Case.
Yeah, we have books that we published that are basically transcripts of our seasons on the Zodiac Killer and the Golden State Killer, and they're called Criminology Podcast Presents Season 1, the Zodiac, and then Season 2, the Golden State Killer, and you can find those on Amazon.
Excellent. Black Box Ned, coming to you from West Virginia, author of Killer on a Pale Horse on Amazon. Let them know where to find you, Ned.
Okay, yes, hello, I'm Ned, and as Ross said, coming to you from West Virginia. Now, of course, I do a BlackBox Online Radio, which comes out at least 3 times a week. Sometimes I can get a small episode out every day, but I try to put content out frequently. BlackBox Online Radio, Killer on a White Horse, actually. That's the name of the book that I put out this year. It's a novel murder mystery, but on Amazon.com, Killer on a White Horse by me, Ned Dehan. And I'm also the host of Astro Psych 400. I was talking about the Zodiac Killer a lot online, and I decided to get more into astrology, so I did a 12-part video series on the channel Astro Psych 400. And the last thing I would share is that on Thursdays on BlackBox Online Radio, I do a weekly segment about the disappearance of Donna Lass, which is a possible Zodiac Killer crime, although I'm really leaning toward a different abductor or different suspect in the disappearance of Donna Lass. I know Morf has a lot to share about that. We talked about that on a different show once, and Morf has some things coming out about Donna Lass as well. It's a fascinating case. So Thursdays on BlackBox Online Radio, and that'll be coming out this week again. So thanks for having me, Ross, by the way.
Absolutely. Been following both these guys for a long time. Definitely check out the interview that Ned just did with Morf on the Zodiac Killer channel. That was a great insight there as well. Unless you guys have anything else for intro, I'm ready to kind of get this going.
Let's get into it.
So, Zodiac 2007. So I'm basically just going to set it off saying that, I watched this film a while back. It kind of introduced me to the case, and I thought it was, this amazing epic. And I am a big David Fincher fan. I'm not going to lie about that part. I'm a big Fight Club fanboy here. But that was before I knew the case, and after, deep diving it for a couple of years, I thought like I'd revisit it. We do obviously film reviews on the channel, as you guys know, so I thought this would be a way to kind of mix the Zodiac research with the film reviews. And yeah, so I mean, my favorite things about this film are like the kind of accurate, like Brian Hartnell's cameo and things like that. Just some of the kind of like the accurate things that represented what was going on at the time. And then there's some other things that don't quite hold up, and Ned and Morf will obviously be the expert on those parts. I know you recently had that question on your channel, Ned, about like what we would rather see in a movie or what we would like to see, and one thing is having, as I said before, seeing the film and then learning the case and go back and reviewing the film again, how they just breezed over the canonical crimes and kind of just like rushed through them in the beginning of this film. I would have liked them to just take a lot more time with it and kind of show what was going on in between, as a kind of just like throwing them at you very rapidly, and then now you're just going to deal with this whole aftermath of this Graysmith story, which is kind of how I felt. And also I wanted to get you guys' thoughts on the whole, I like the way that they showed the July 4th scene, right? But also skipping the first canonical crime and just coming in kind of almost randomly. It's like, that's it. Again, when I didn't know the story, it was just like, okay, yeah, this is a great movie. But then learning the case, like I said, and then going back to it, it's like, it seems kind of weird to just be in almost right in the middle there. So I don't know what you guys think. Whoever wants to go first.
Go ahead, Morf. You can go first.
Yeah, I guess if you don't really know the case that well, skipping over the Faraday Jensen murders, you're sort of starting behind the eight ball. They don't really explain a lot of what happened. It's just a vague mention. Oh, those kids that were killed in Vallejo, and he calls the department and finds out, sure enough, there were some kids killed, but they don't really give you those details. And
Right.
the way Fincher explained it was that he didn't want to have that in the film since there was no witness there to say what really happened, how things went down. So he didn't want to just make up what happened, which I totally understand that, but at the same time, it sort of left some people in the dark.
Right.
So, and I think you're right that the movie basically flies through the first half of the movie as all the known crimes by Zodiac, and then the second half of the movie is sort of the obsession and the hunt to catch him. And like you, I'm a big Fincher fan. Fight Club, Seven. He's made some really good movies, and this is a tremendous one that was sort of a box office flop because I think people were expecting a slasher film, and this really wasn't that. But all in all, it's a great movie. It's one of my favorites. I've seen it probably 100 times, no exaggeration.
Ned, what do you got?
So about starting with the 4th of July, I think that is obviously someone's going to be saying, well, the Zodiac didn't write a letter or make a phone call after the first canonical crime, the Lake Herman Road murders. The letters didn't come until after the second canonical crime, the Blue Rock Springs shooting, which was on the 4th of July, really close to July 5th, actually. But there's a huge backstory behind the first crime, the Lake Herman Road murders. And I did a book discussion recently on the police reports in Zodiac Killer Just the Facts, the one that Tom Voigt put out. And you hear all these things about Betty Lou Jensen, the female victim at Lake Herman Road. Has practically a stalker, this guy named Ricky, whom she had somewhat of a relationship with him, but it seems mostly like they're just walking together in the hallways of high school because they're 16. And he's practically stalking the family. The mother's concerned about him. We got to close the gate because this guy's bothering us. And then David Faraday has this whole other story about he may have pissed off somebody in the drug trade. And I mean, what about all that information? I mean, in terms of investigations, as someone once said, the Fincher film wanted to focus in on Graysmith. It's really about Robert Graysmith writing his book and his investigation as opposed to the crimes themselves. But you lose so much of an understanding if you're going to do it that way.
Yeah, and I think to Ned's point, he's exactly right, because the movie's really based on the book, and the book essentially lays out the facts about the case, but then really goes down a rabbit hole of this is the suspect that after all these revelations, all these twists, this is the person I've settled on, that's Zodiac, and I'm obsessed with proving it. And that's really how the movie sort of mirrors the book. So Ned's point is exactly right, because he sort of went down this trail looking at Arthur Lee Allen as a suspect. It ends with primarily focusing on him and not so much the overview of the entire case and all the different crimes.
Yep, absolutely. I know when you kind of posed that challenge question on your channel, Ned, like the other thing that I would have liked to have seen, as Morf just said, instead of just following Graysmith step for step, I would have liked to have seen a more, what if Tashi was the main character and following Tashi in his investigation, like somewhat the way it follows the detectives in Seven, as Morf said, you know what I mean? I think I would have preferred to have seen that side, because as Ned kind of just mentioned there, obviously, whenever you have this crime, especially a murder, like what's the first known tactic? It's going to known associates, as Ned said, and usually looking at people who knew the victim. So obviously you're going to have these more personal suspects before you have anybody that wrote in a letter or any random serial killer. I think that would have made a little bit more sense. But again, the first time I saw it, knowing nothing, I thought it was the most amazing thing in the world. I was 100% convinced it was Arthur Lee Allen, knowing literally nothing about the case. And then, I started to look more into the movie, and then I kind of reverse engineered the case that way and realized, like, okay, there's some things missing here. Also, as you said, more from, the way Fincher explained, he doesn't want to show any crimes that didn't have live, verifiable witnesses. It makes some sense, but then they make up this whole entire friendship between Avery and Graysmith that didn't really exist either. That was just something I learned the other day. Watching this movie, I would have thought they were best friends. You know what I mean? So that threw me off a little as well.
And then that was sort of, I guess, some movie magic to tie the characters together and for the audience, which I get why they do that.
Right.
The people making the film don't always say, let's be 100% accurate. They sometimes say, let's do this in a way that the audience, this is all tied together.
Yeah.
And in reality, those two really didn't have any interaction with each other. But you're right. In the movie, it looks like they were best buds hanging out and, thinking about the Zodiac case 24/7 together.
Yeah, absolutely.
And to add one thing,
Good.
Oh yeah, if we're going to be critical of the film, then my biggest complaint about the Zodiac movie was that they spent so much time showing Graysmith trying to get a handwriting sample of Arthur Lee Allen's writing. He's like, okay, I got the right hand, but I need the left hand. No, I need the left hand, but I need the right hand. And he's going to the judge. And I was like, they put minute after minute after minute of him trying to obtain a handwriting sample and trying to find out is he ambidextrous or not. And I was just like, you have the Zodiac killer story, and that's what you want to do with it. Even if the movie's 2.5 hours long, what is it, 2 hours, 37 minutes? I mean, Netflix kind of puts that up. So, I mean, I would have done something else. I mean, that would be the answer to my challenge question, Ross. Like, if you could make a different type of Zodiac movie, something else. Not well, let's have Arthur Lee Allen scribble his name on a piece of paper.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I mean, especially I brought it up on Tom's forum before and some other places. Like the first time I watched it, when they were searching, I believe it was Alan's trailer, and we got the 2 pistols here, and Tasha's like, oh yeah, well that's a coincidence because I have the giant rifle right here, like that. Not knowing the case, that totally solidified for me. Like, well, if he's got all those guns in the trailer, it's obviously him, right? And then it's just like, and also, as Ned said, that's in the first 35 minutes, and you still have 2.5 hours more of movie after that. It's kind of like, I don't know, kind of lost me on that one.
Yeah, and one thing I do like that they did was they really tried to demonstrate the lack of coordination going on between the different jurisdictions. It's things as simple as not having fax machines to send each other stuff, not communicating, not knowing what the other department was doing. I think they did a really good job of hammering that home, because I think that was really a big thing going on with the case back then, and that's something they really put a spotlight on.
I totally agree, Morf, but isn't this counter argument kind of coming up on the internet now, where people were saying, well, it was really a lot more coordinated than people think. I've been seeing that come up here and there, but I agree with how they portrayed it in the film.
Yeah, I don't think it was early on. I think it was very much like it was portrayed in the movie until they sort of San Francisco got involved and sort of took the lead, from these quote unquote small back towns where it was happening. They had a big city, well-known police force, experienced in investigating a lot of violent crimes. And I think they sort of took the lead, and then the Department of Justice in California got involved and sort of streamlined everything and coordinated everything. So I think eventually they did get on the same page and put a team together. But for a while there, they were really struggling to match stuff up and figure out what the other department was doing.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'd say that came across to me. That's one of the things I thought landed pretty well. If you guys want to do some highlight scenes, I'm not sure if either one of you have favorite scenes. Sounds like you don't have too many, Ned. But Lake Berryessa, was definitely my favorite scene. I think the historical accuracy is fairly close there. You can verify that for me, Morf. That's why I chose today for our review, because I believe it's the anniversary tomorrow, if I'm not mistaken. But the way Fincher filmed this scene, if I'm not mistaken, is they went there on the same day. And this is something I learned in the trivia on IMDb. Apparently, they flew in trees because the location looks quite a bit different when they filmed as it did back then in the 60s. I didn't even know flying in trees was a thing. I've never heard of that ever happening for a movie before. So that was a bit wild to me.
Yeah, I actually saw some video and some photographs of them flying those trees, and it was pretty neat. The spot used to be really there's a lot of like grass and big noticeable trees, and you look at it today, it's just like a flat dirt, worn out section of ground. The part of the island where they were on is underwater at times, depending on what the water level is there. So it is totally different, but they wanted the scene to be as accurate as possible. So even right down to the trees, trying to get the atmosphere right, was something, that one of those attentions to detail that Fincher's known for.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Actually, you asked about favorite scenes. My favorite scene in the movie is absolutely Lake Berryessa, and I think that's the only scene that I've pulled up on YouTube and watched over and over again. And the reason is because when I saw the film live, I didn't think twice about it. It's like, all right, I mean, yeah, he tied them up and he stabbed them. And he's wearing that hooded costume, of course. That's, quite different than the other crime that was committed. But then, as I watched it many times, I found that it becomes more and more horrific. And I chose to do that because people in the comment section were saying, this is the scariest scene I've ever seen in a movie. I'm like, really? Is it scary? Well, if you watch it more than once and you actually think about the emotions that people would feel, if this hooded perpetrator who comes up in this elaborate costume, which looks like an executioner's hood, is holding a gun, and he's about to murder you. And I give so much credit to the actress who played Cecilia Shepard in that scene, because it looks like she has real terror in her eyes, knowing that she's about to be stabbed and ultimately murdered, of course. But so that's my favorite scene.
Yeah, I think that's my favorite scene overall as well. But there's just the interactions between like the newspaper editorial staff and how they're all trying to figure stuff out, and even down to the details of the letters moving from the mail truck through the sorting department and up eventually to the editor. I like the way he really did that with all the little details of how the letter came and how they got it, and becoming aware of what was going on. There's a lot of that all the way through the movie, little details like that really are cool the way they did that.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think one of Dave Fincher's strong points is like those kind of montage, pacing, detail scenes. And going back quickly to Berryessa, so there was that one rumor that the Zodiac had carved that symbol into Cecilia Shepard, and then obviously I believe Narlo debunked that. And then going back to Graysmith's book, apparently he had the wrong location in his book, the wrong Zodiac Island location. So that was an interesting tidbit. I haven't looked into that too much, but
there were definitely some different errors in his book. Some of it, obviously, they didn't translate to the movie. The Lake Herman Road scene, for example.
Yep.
In his book, he stated that the witness that saw Zodiac's car was coming from work. He was actually going to work. But you can sort of go through and pick out little mistakes he made along the way with various issues and things that he reported in the book that just are not accurate.
Well, one thing that I remember from Graysmith's writing is, I didn't remember this exact paragraph, but when I was reading the Myth of the Zodiac Killer by Thomas Horn, he had a section of Graysmith's book that he was quoting where Graysmith was talking about how the perpetrator at Lake Herman Road was a stocky man, and the stocky man approached David and Betty Lou. And I mean, he's calling him out on that, saying, if there are no witnesses, how do you have any idea what the victim or what the perpetrator's body type looks like? And that's one time when I'll give no argument. Yes, it seems like that's a blatant fudging of the facts. And if you guys have some more insight about like why Graysmith planted all of those half truths and falsehoods into his book. I'd love to hear, to be honest. I mean, it's just a never-ending mystery.
You know, I don't know. I've never spoken to Graysmith. You know, I don't know why he did that. Some of the things, you know, I think he was a rookie writer, and you know that he was a cartoonist by trade, so that was his how he made a living. So researching, writing a book was something totally new to him. And you know, I think we all are capable of making mistakes. I think he made some mistakes, and I think he also took some liberties and maybe made some stuff up to fit more of his suspect. But again, I don't know the truth, but I'm assuming that since he assumed Zodiac was later determined to be a bigger, stocky guy, that he just put, you know, a stocky guy approached the couple, since he, you know, we know later on that Zodiac ultimately killed them. Then he just said, okay, Zodiac was stocky, so he had to have approached them, and he was stocky, and describing it sort of for the reader.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. It seemed kind of you know, sensationalized, just more of like the excitement, entertainment, the way he kind of carried those scenes. But I mean, going back to how Fincher didn't want to depict any of the canonical crimes that didn't have like a surviving, you know, witness. I mean, weren't there people on site that were like there short, like minutes later after it happened? So yes, I mean, you could say there weren't technically people literally there the whole time that watched it happen. But I mean, if people arrived within a few minutes after, I mean, you can mostly get an idea of how it went down, right? So that's kind of what I was wondering about, of just like skipping that first one altogether and coming in on July 4th, you know?
I would have liked to have seen how Fincher portrayed the Lake Herman Road, but again, I understand why he didn't, because it would have all been speculation and just you know, how he thinks it played out. But it'd be interesting to watch on film the way that it seems to have gone down. But then, you know, who knows? Was it really one person? Was it two people? What kind of car was he driving? What would you show in the movie that he was driving? You know, that kind of stuff. What was there any dialogue between them? So I do get why he chose not to include that in there, just to not make up stuff and just stick to the known things.
Absolutely.
Oh yes, and you're asking about like some scenes in the movie that we like. Well, there's one where it shows Graysmith with all of his boxes of the papers relevant to the Zodiac killer mystery, and it's filling up his living room. And I really like that one as well. And that could also be a possible reason about why there are these errors in Graysmith's 1986 book. Because I asked Mark Hewitt, author of the Zodiac Hunted trilogy, why do you think Graysmith had all these inaccuracies in his book? And he said two things. The first is that Graysmith was writing without computers, without an electronic database, and he may have made genuine errors in his research. And also, he may have just simply forgotten things that, you know, because he just can't do some type of Control F search and pull it out of the document that he needed. And so that could be a possibility, that it's just, you know, human errors. But I recently talked to Mike Rodelli, author of In the Shadow of Mount Diablo, and he said that there may have been a deal going on with Graysmith and the publisher when they wanted to hear about a suspect, like a prime suspect, so he reshaped the book that way. But, I mean, he said, right?
Yeah, I mean, I would somewhat agree with that. That I'm sure you're familiar with this, Morph. The way it was discussed from something I was either watching or reading was similar to how Stone did the JFK movie, where they were basically going to be using Oswald as a suspect, and as they began researching, they kind of realized it kind of doesn't really look like he's the suspect. It was explained to me somewhat similar the way of, you know, Fincher was doing this, where they thought like Arthur Lee Allen was like, you know, a sure shot, and then they started looking into it and seeing like, oh yeah, there's really not that much evidence for him actually, so it will kind of be more just a Graysmith biopic in a way, or Graysmith's version of the story.
Yeah, and the movie really is, even more than the Zodiac, it's about the obsession of Graysmith and the cops that are hunting for him. Their obsession with the case more than it is about the Zodiac himself. So that's why there's a lot more time focused on those characters than the actual crimes, because it was their obsession that sort of led them down this road, and which I think is a really cool storyline, because it really, Ned pointed out that scene. I had a full office of boxes and notebooks, and luckily I've since put all that stuff on thumb drives and stuff, so I can, I have a bunch of it in the garage stacked away. Hopefully I'll never need to go in there again. But the age of trying to do an investigation like that out of your house, and just getting sucked down a rabbit hole after a rabbit hole, is something that was real. I mean, it's happened to a lot of us, I'm sure, that have stuck with this case for years. And I can understand that Graysmith would sort of be stressed and easily make mistakes having to do that stuff the old-fashioned way.
Absolutely.
Oh, yes, and there is a particular reason, though, why I always like to ask people the question about what kind of new Zodiac movie do you want. And it is because I was on Wikipedia, maybe 2011 or something, and there's this section in there about someone was saying that they should have made the movie about Gareth Penn instead of Robert Graysmith, author of Time 17. And now that I've spent some more time with the Zodiac material, it's like, yeah, actually, I think that may actually be a little bit more of an entertaining film, because that's more about like borderline descent into madness and so on. And I don't know, like, what you guys would think about, like, if there's another Zodiac book or writer. I guess we could make a movie about Michael Morford or something if you want to use a Zodiac researcher. But no, Gareth Penn, that could work too.
Yeah, I personally, I don't know. I wouldn't really want to see one about another suspect. I think that's why a good documentary is actually needed, because I think there really hasn't been a good recent one that's full in-depth over maybe multiple parts, that really explores the crimes in a documentary style, versus trying to fit into a 2.5 hour partially fictionalized movie. I think there's room for a nice documentary that really covers the case with the accurate details, and that's something I'd like to see. Remains since 2007. I mean, there was a decent documentary made for the actual Zodiac movie, and it's on the collector's disc.
Yep.
That's a rather good documentary, but that wasn't even really in depth, covering every little detail. But that's probably the best one I can think of, and that's been, again, made back in 2007, so that's 15 years old.
Hey, did you ever see Obsession Into Darkness?
And I didn't.
It's a series.
Dude, awesome in that one, and it covers so many great Zodiac things.
Absolutely.
Check that one out.
No, I agree. Definitely check. Go ahead.
Is on the Zodiac Killer channel. That's the documentary that I narrated, and it's done in 3 different parts. Like, you can find it here on YouTube for free. But just saying, shameless plug.
Yeah, I mean, so this is like something that I would probably never say in the movie reviews on my channel, but like, I think in the Zodiac case, it would have really helped to, like, that's why I made the argument I would have loved to have seen Tashi as the main character, and just, following the law enforcement side and looking at the suspects. Like, in any other movie, I know that gets super, like, any other crime film, that gets a bit redundant, because it's like, oh yeah, it's just going to follow the detectives of them trying to solve the case and blah, blah, blah. But in a case this complicated, as Morf was saying, I think it actually would have helped, because I would have liked to have seen them look at and analyze the suspects the way that Ned, deep dives the suspects on his channel. Like, when I need a suspect background, I go straight to BlackBox online radio, and it's great. You know what I mean? But in this, you get a super hard double down on Arthur Lee Allen. I don't know how you guys say it, Lee. And you know what I mean? That brings me to my next part, which I'd argue is maybe my second favorite scene. And it's kind of odd, the whole Bob Vaughn scene in the basement, right? Because they're talking about Rick Marshall, and he doesn't even make an appearance in the film, right? No one ever goes and talks to him and questions him. Graysmith ends up going to Bob Vaughn's house, and they go in the basement, and he's pulling up the the records of when they played that movie. Was it Red Phantom, Morf, or whichever one that they were looking at? And I don't know. It's an interesting scene, but at the same time, it's the way they use Rick Marshall for a red herring. It's kind of odd. You know what I mean? I don't know what you guys thought. So.
Well, I think maybe one reason they did that because that was Graysmith's favorite suspect until he got shifted onto Alan, and he sort of was going down that path of Rick Marshall, and Ken Narlow, that was his favorite suspect, and they spent a lot of time digging into him, and he sort of by accident shifted over to Arthur Lee Allen, and so I think it was interesting to include him. You know, he's been someone that was a real interesting character in this case. I don't know if would ever call him my favorite suspect, but he was definitely someone just based on his personality and his the mannerisms and the things that were known about him, the way he acted. He seemed like someone that I could picture being Zodiac. So he always had an interest for me from that perspective.
For sure. What'd you think, Dad?
Yeah, I have one thing to share about Dave Tosti, because you're saying that he could have been a good focus for the film. He goes on to become a suspect for writing the 1978 letter, which is unconfirmed, but because he's mentioned it. Yeah, you're not even, you know exactly what I'm talking about, right?
Yep.
And
I know exactly.
So they could have that angle. And giving a shout out to Pedro Fernandez, who's in the audience. He said that he knew Dave Tosti personally, and he once said a message to him, hey, you went from the Zodiac killer case to doing pawn shop robberies, because it seemed like his career had some type of downturn. All that stuff. Sure, I'd love to see a movie on that.
Yep. I totally agree. That'd be sweet. So that being said, Morf, you know, you've deep dived all these suspects for a very long time. Did you find anything interesting at Rick Marshall at any point, or you pretty much out on them?
Well, he did have some interesting things that the Zodiac was interested in. He was interested in. He seemed to be shady and maybe hiding some of his background. Maybe hiding details of his life. You know, he had the connection to Riverside. So there were a lot of circumstantial things. But then there was no evidence he was ever into guns or shooting. Different things like that. None of the stuff was like firsthand verified. There's all these mysterious discussions of him hiding exploding film canisters, and I don't know how much of that was truly real. I know that stuff existed back then, but I don't know if it was confirmed that he was doing all that stuff. But he definitely seemed like a character, the kind of person that I could picture being Zodiac. But I don't think there's anything ever solid to connect him as far as physical evidence, direct eyewitnesses, things like that he was indeed Zodiac.
For sure. How about you, Ned? Any interest in Marshall?
Absolutely an interest in him, because he seems like one of those guys that is getting off on the attention. There's that very famous clip of him where he's like, well, if there is a Zodiac killer out there, I think he's exactly like me, and saying stuff to that effect. And that makes me very skeptical, though. That seems like more of someone who wants to showboat, not exactly the kind that would hide in plain sight. That's not how I interpreted that. It's more just someone who's like, people think I'm important, time to milk the spotlight. But I would say that there's a big thing about Marshall that I want to investigate for a future episode of BBOR, and that is to find out if there actually was a murder of Rick Marshall. That there's a story out there that Rick Marshall was born Joe Don Dickey, and that he murdered a man named Rick Marshall and assumed his name. I would just like to find out what is the truth behind that story.
Absolutely. So, go ahead,
he definitely seemed like someone that was had some stuff to hide, and again, I don't know if that made him a serial killer, but he definitely seemed like what you saw with him wasn't what you got. There's something beneath the surface there.
Yeah, I like the whole Red Phantom angle, because that's interesting, and the films that the Zodiac was supposedly interested in at the time. Now, isn't the whole thing about the film canister, Morph, that one of the crimes was supposedly filmed, that it was the snuff film? What was it, Berryessa or somewhere else?
Yeah.
I mean, Was anything to that? Was anybody able to confirm any of that? Was that
Nah,
just
there
pure
was
speculation?
none of that stuff was ever confirmed, and the person that turned in Rick Marshall in the book, I think he was called Wallace Penny, was actually two people that turned him in for whatever reason. I don't know why they thought he was the Zodiac, other than again a lot of strange things about him seemed to be Zodiac-like, but
Yeah.
I don't know that there was anything to that other than them suspecting he was an oddball, and I don't know how they would know these things about these film canisters being stored there that were rigged with explosive nitrate and stuff like that. It just seems like part of a big making it a bigger story, having all those crazy details.
Yeah, that's true. I would agree with that. So how about the whole the thing Graysmith introduces in the film, which is the whole I guess he thought it was Rick Marshall's handwriting, but it was actually Bob Vaughn's handwriting, which is introduced in the scene. Now, I always wondered, either one of you guys, I'm not sure, I suppose more if you probably heard of this, is Graysmith thought that the Zodiac was like drawing over the posters and recreating the handwriting that way. And like, was there anything to that, or was that just another movie thing, or is that just Graysmith?
That was definitely a theory of his, although I think from what I understand, some of the experts in some of the forged letters later on felt that somehow Zodiac may have been, or a Zodiac copycat, I should say, may have been trying to trace over some of Zodiac's writing in a similar fashion to what Graysmith was talking about. But I think early on that wasn't an issue. It was primarily later on.
Makes sense. You got anything else on that, Ned?
Yeah, I do, because firstly, you talked about the snuff film angle at Lake Berryessa, and a lot of people, and by a lot I mean several times over the past 2 years, people have written into BlackBox Online Radio saying that's their theory about why the Zodiac killer deviated from his pattern, why he put on the black costume with the symbol on it, and why he had the conversation with Brian and Cecilia when he could have killed them with the handgun and walked away. But as they say, they think because of all of these references in the Zodiac's letters to film, as well as other things like books and comic books, they were like, this guy wanted to film that, and that it was indeed a snuff film. I don't know how they could substantiate that, and I think it would be a much more widely understood fact. But Thomas Warren is going to be putting out some new stuff about how he thinks he has a new suspect for the Lake Berryessa stabbing, Leonard Lake, one of the Boneyard killers, and that it was indeed a snuff film. I'm not sure how that's going to play out, and I'm just going to leave it at no comment for that. Leonard Lake is a Zodiac killer suspect. He's the guy who's working with Charles Ng. But I think that's more of what Morf was saying about people want to make the story bigger. They want to expand upon that, and every murder under the sun can be connected to the Zodiac killer in some way. It's kind of weird.
I totally agree. Before we leave Berryessa, just I'm sure you guys spotted the Brian Hartnell cameo about an hour, 40 minutes in at the he walks by with his wife in the police station. That's one of the things about this thing is the stuff that Fincher did so well, like the Berryessa scene, and then getting the Brian Hartnell cameo. It's like if someone else does another Zodiac film, like they're probably not getting Hartnell back. So there's just certain things he did that'll probably be almost impossible to recreate a second time. You know what I mean? So I think that does set kind of a high standard.
There's definitely little Easter eggs in there as far as that kind of stuff, and I think even Ken Narlow, I think, was supposed to be in it, but I think he told me that he was sick at the time, and he couldn't film his part, or they filmed it and they didn't use it. I can't remember, but it was one of the things we haven't talked about was really the props of the movie, the letters, the things that people are holding,
the murder victim clothes.
Yeah, and I actually recently spoke to the prop master from that movie, and we had a pretty long conversation about what was included, making the Halloween cards that Avery gets, and they had to painstakingly make like 30 of those cards because I said, well, why couldn't you just make one and use it over and over again? And I forget what she explained to me, but you couldn't just do that because there had to be some continuation of you opening up the letter, for example, and the envelope gets ripped, and now you need more envelopes that look exactly like that. And they were like custom to that time. So they weren't just like a regular envelope you could buy at the drugstore today. They were an envelope from like 19. Everything that they used for the movie was sort of from that time. So just making the attention to detail to make all those props and make so many copies of them and to make them look like they were genuine from that time period and actually from Zodiac, I think was another cool thing about the movie.
Absolutely, yeah. That's probably my favorite film. My favorite fact about the film is just they even said like in the chronicle scenes, the stacks of newspapers on their desks. Like if you were to pick up one of those stacks, they were like authentic 1960s newspapers. So you could pick up one off the bottom, and it would be from that week back then. You know, it's like obviously you can't see that on the camera, but it's just like shows the crazy detail of Fincher being detail oriented, which definitely those Easter eggs are my favorite part of the film by far.
Yeah, and you've got the calendar on the wall that says 1969. That's what I like about the movie is it makes me anyway. I don't know if anyone else feels the same, but makes me feel like I'm there in that time period.
For sure.
Because everywhere you look, it's the old style clothes, the old style furniture. Everything is just like 1969, and you feel like you're there. It sort of transport you to that time. So I think that's really cool about that movie.
I totally agree. Anything on any of that stuff, Ned?
Yeah, absolutely, about Easter eggs, because I said that the Lake Berryessa scene was my favorite, the one I watched over and over again. And I think it might even still be on YouTube, the David Fincher commentary about the Lake Berryessa scene. And a big thing he shared was that he wanted to show that Brian Hartnell and Cecilia Shepard were acquainted, but they weren't extremely familiar with each other. I didn't catch any of this watching the scene until I heard him say that. Because you said the anniversary of Berryessa is coming up. Well, in 2019, for the anniversary, I did a reading of the transcript because it was the 50th anniversary and I wanted to do something. And there are all these things in it about Brian saying multiple times, I'm a sociology major. But I thought it was weird in the film when Cecilia is the one who says it. He's a sociology major. And what Brian says back to her is actually pre-law. And what David Fincher said in the commentary is that when Brian Hartnell attended the screening, Brian Hartnell's wife, I think it was, turned to him and said, "You weren't a sociology major." And then his character says, "Actually, pre-law." And they had a laugh about it, even though it's something very terrible in his life. Brian Hartnell and his wife had a laugh out of that. But that's just another example of those Easter eggs.
Absolutely, yeah. That's interesting. I clearly need to watch that Fincher commentary because that's something I should have did for this. But I'm glad you put me onto that because I'll definitely be revisiting that. Before we leave Berryessa real quick, and again, how we said those the canonical crime attack scenes, whatever you want to call them, they're pretty short because they just get you right in and out. But what I would have liked to have seen is after he ties up Hartnell and Shepard is how, maniacal would it have been to have had the Zodiac walking back up the hill, even kind of like, the way Rambo walks out in First Blood from the farm, you know what I mean? Have him slowly walking up that trail and then maybe even have him writing on the door. Like you don't have to show over his shoulder what it is that he's writing, but just to see him walking out slowly, taking out a pen or a Sharpie, whatever, and then writing that message on the door to literally show that like, yeah, he just tied up people that are bleeding to death down the hill, and he's like not running away like any other, assumed murder would be doing. He's stopping to write a letter, and then, then they could have cut to the next scene and have the police checking it out. Because I felt like there's more. Even though they showed his interaction with, his victims really well, I felt like they could have. There's a lot more going on at Berryessa. Of course, you have the other guy, the lurker that was seen by the girls. So I think you could have did a little bit more with Berryessa before we just got right out of there and got back to like Avery and Graysmith at the Chronicle. You know what I mean? In my opinion.
Yeah, I think that all makes sense too, and I think it comes down to the time because again, you're already pushing it at what was it, 2 hours and 37 minutes. So it's like, all right, if we put everything in there we want in there that would make sense to go in there, then all of a sudden it's 3 hours, and then it's a whole nother universe in movies.
Yeah, agreed. But on that count, I would say you could have cut out less of like the Avery Graysmith non-existent, talking in the bars, conversations, relationships, and could have stuck to more accurate things that really did happen, kind of as Ned was saying earlier. Just my opinion, though, guys. If I'm totally off, tell me in the comments that you loved all the 2-hour talking scenes. You know what I mean?
Yeah. The thing for all the things that I think could have done better, or things I would have liked to seen at the end of the day, I don't question, because I think it's such a wonderful movie that it's almost like I don't want to criticize it in any way. I don't want to change it.
For sure.
So it's, if it had been done differently with more stuff, I would have still liked it as much probably. But the way it is now, I don't have any complaints.
Yeah. It's certainly good. I mean, I'm not saying it's the worst movie ever. It's just being a case noob and watching the film and walking out thinking I was a genius, and that without a doubt in my mind it was Arthur Lee Allen, because that's what Graysmith served up for me. And then later on study the case and be like, well, actually there is basically no evidence to say that it was Arthur Lee Allen. You know what I mean? So it's just kind of like I felt duped once I learned the case. I'm like, wait a minute, like, but the movie sold me that. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, you and a million other people probably the same way. I think there's a big influx of Arthur Lee Allen was the Zodiac stuff going on at that time.
I agree. Yeah. Anything you said, Ned?
Yeah, because when I was watching the Fincher Zodiac film, it wasn't until I got to the end, then I thought, okay, they have all these explanations about why Arthur Lee Allen is not the Zodiac killer, like they do the title cards and such at the end. But then I was like, what if Arthur Lee Allen had a partner, and that someone else was behind the letters, and that he committed the murders? And a lot of people were thinking about that. I did an episode about that on BlackBox online radio called Arthur Lee Allen's Partner. And I was just saying that I sat on it for 6 months. I didn't want to put it out there. I thought people would laugh at me. But over the past couple of years, people are like, yeah, I was thinking the same thing. I mean, so that's what kind of started this birth of the multiple killers theory for me, which is not a good rabbit hole to go down. You can always add in more perpetrators to your mystery. Okay, it wasn't 2 people, it was 3. No, it was 4. No, it was 12. I mean, 88. But yeah, that's what got me curious.
Okay, well, in that case, let me go to my challenge question, which I left on Ned's channel, which is the depiction of Don Cheney in this film, which is having read, I don't know how much you get into Don Cheney, Morf, having read Sighting In on the Zodiac Killer by Drew Beeson, and then going back and seeing this film, because I had totally forgot Don Cheney was like in this film at all when I didn't really know who he was the first time, other than he's the guy who brought Arthur Lee Allen forward, if you want to say that. But, Tashi is talking to Graysmith, and they're going, "Oh, hey, can we get that deposition from Cheney?" And they go, "Oh yeah, we can get that." They go down to his job, like, "Hey, Cheney, can you sign that for us?" He goes, "Yeah, definitely, I can sign that for you. Thank you." And then he's in it for like 3 seconds, and they totally gloss over him. And I'm like, dude, if they're making Arthur Lee Allen the main suspect here, you think they would have spent a little more time on the guy who was their main, witness for bringing him forward, and they really kind of just glossed over him, which I found that a little bit strange, Don't know what you guys thought.
Yeah, I mean, someone like Cheney obviously is a pivotal character in the story of Allen, because, if Allen really said those things, said, I'm going to kill people, I'm going to call myself Zodiac, I'm going to write letters to and then that stuff happened, well, there's a couple of things that are probably possibilities. A, Allen was the Zodiac, or one of those people he told he was going to do all that stuff to did it, and did it just the way he said he was going to do it, which could implicate Allen, or Cheney, excuse me.
Exactly.
Or the third possibility is just that it was a lie, and that Cheney had a reason to make that stuff up about Allen, which it turns out there really was in real life a reason that he might want to see Allen in trouble with the law.
Mm-hmm. Ned?
Okay, first, like you, Ross, I had no idea who Don Cheney was before I saw that movie. And at the end of the movie, I wasn't thinking twice about Don Cheney. It's not really until you watch the accompanying documentaries, and Don Cheney is, of course, featured in that. And then you get more of a window into that. I've also read Sighting In on the Zodiac Killer. I follow Drew Beeson's show, The Zodcast. He's the author of Sighting In on the Zodiac Killer, of course. And Don Cheney almost fits the mold of the actual gifted underachiever who created this lie with a perfect patsy. But one thing that I don't think is disputed is that Don Chaney was a horrible liar in real life. I mean, like if you go back to his interview with Tom Voight in the early 2000s, he said he didn't know what Blue Rock Springs Park was, but then somehow 5 years later, 6 years later, he's like, oh yeah, Arthur Lee Allen walked me through Blue Rock Springs Park. Well, normally people don't wait 5 years and suddenly remember. I mean, it's usually the other way around.
Yeah.
He's, but about who Don Chaney was, some people think that he was just an attention seeker, like the way I talked about Marshall, that he just wanted to be interviewed. He liked being mentioned in Graysmith's book. I don't know. It could. There's a whole range of possibilities.
Yeah, I mean, I just think it's interesting because they cut to these Don Chaney scenes real quick, and he's kind of this skinny guy in a tie with glasses at his engineer job, and he kind of looks more like the composite sketch than Arthur Lee Allen does. Engineering background, mathematics, so it's almost like he matches the Zodiac profile more than Arthur Lee Allen does. So what I would have expected to see was a kind of, I guess, not necessarily interrogation scene, but kind of like an interview scene with Chaney, like tell us the story, because you got that really good scene with, Tashi and whoever else was with him when they were interviewing Allen, and he's got the Zodiac watch on, and he's telling him, the Most Dangerous Game is my favorite book and all that. I would expected you would kind of have a scene with Chaney, kind of like, okay, if you're telling us like what Morf just said, okay, taping the pen flashlight to the gun and calling yourself a Zodiac and attacking these people at Lover Lanes, I kind of would have expected like a deep dive into that statement, not just like, hey, we got to go get Chaney's statement. Hey, Chaney, can you do that for us? Yeah. And then it just cuts to the next scene. You know what I mean? I was just like another thing that I just thought they kind of glossed over. But like Morf said, it's a 3-hour movie, so they're not going to deep dive every little detail. But I thought it was something that could have used a little more substance.
Yeah, I think there were some things left out there that could have been said. Again, it's been alleged that Allen had done something to one of Chaney's daughters.
Yeah.
I don't know all the details of that, but there's evidence that seems to point in that direction. So that gives him motive to want to see Allen get in trouble. Right. And at least, even if the cops don't wind up thinking Allen Zodiac, it could give Chaney some pleasure to send the cops his way and give him a hassle, give him a hard time. And Allen didn't do himself any favors, because then he sort of embraced the attention and embraced being thought of as Zodiac, writing letters that made him sound like he was a suspect, and then going out and getting a Zodiac watch and doing the things he did to draw attention to himself, because I think he craved attention as well. And even if it was in a negative way, he was happy to get it.
For sure. I really don't like that depiction of when Graysmith, we all know this is part of the case, of saying like, hey, did anybody ever try to insert themselves into the case? And obviously they do the scene in the movie when Graysmith asks Tashi, and he says, oh yeah, one guy did. This guy, Allen, wrote me this letter that, said, sorry, I'm not your man, and all that thing. And like, I just kind of found that unsound reasoning that Graysmith was, again, like we said, he's a cartoonist, so he doesn't have some, legendary investigator, background the way Tashi does. But for him to just say, oh man, he wrote you the letter? Oh, it's definitely him, dude. And then they just spend so much time chasing him after that. You know what I mean? I kind of found that like, okay, I could kind of see it, but at the same time, like, in my opinion, it doesn't seem like a very Zodiac thing to do, to write the lead investigator and say, hey man, it's not me, but I totally wish I could help you guys. That's just my opinion on it.
Yeah, I'm there with you. I think there's a lot of things there that could have maybe with time been worked out a little bit more and come back to and circled back to say, hey, the stuff about Allen maybe isn't true, and maybe we're going down the wrong road. I mean, today I know there's several cops right now that still think Allen is a Zodiac. I know that for a fact. Yeah. And because they've been sort of fed the lines that have come along over the years. So despite everything that there is to rule Allen out, there's still people that think he was a Zodiac within law enforcement.
Yeah. And I mean, again, with the whole circumstantial thing, I can understand it. And even with the Don Cheney thing, it's, you know, the whole Drew Beeson theory, it's like, okay, I could understand it even more. But at the same time, you know, the physical evidence, and Morf has been following this for a long time, doesn't really seem to go that way. I'm going to pivot us over to some of the things that I don't love about the film and just be a little bit more critical. It was a bit slower to me on the secondary and third watches than it was the first time, because again, the first time I didn't know the case, so I was just like, okay, this is the most insane, ridiculous thing I've ever heard of in my life, and I was totally absorbed. But after having already seen the film and knowing the case, the dialogue did kind of slow down at some points when there wasn't much going on, in particular when the Zodiac makes the bomb diagram letter, the whole Mount Diablo thing, and their news is talking about how he said he's going to bomb the bus and shoot the kiddies as they come bouncing out, and Graysmith is taking his son to school or whatever, and he keeps trying to turn off the TVs and the radios. Okay, once or twice is good, but it showed him trying to turn off the newscast like 3 or 4 times, and I was like, okay, I get it, he doesn't want his son to hear the school bus threat, but I feel like they hammered that one home a little bit too much for me. Just nitpicking.
Yeah, and it may be because maybe they asked Graysmith what were some of the things that really worried you or bothered you, and he said, I was worried for my son when all this was going on, so they said, all right, well, let's really hammer that home in those parts, you know, trying to relay that fear that you had, but again, who knows where they got that from and why they decided to harp on those couple things that they did.
Yeah, that makes sense. You got anything on anything we covered, Ned?
Yeah, I'd actually like to go back a little bit, because with regards to Don Cheney and the alleged molestation of his daughter by Arthur Lee Allen, I'm going to give a little bit of disagreement. I personally don't believe that molestation ever happened. I think it occurred allegedly in 1963, they said. So his daughter would have been around 3.5 to 4 years old at the most. And I don't know if Arthur Lee Allen ever went after children that young. And also, Don Cheney remained friends with Arthur Lee Allen for 6 months after that incident would have taken place, if it did. As I said, I don't believe it. But my biggest problem is, if somebody has sexually assaulted your daughter, then why frame them for being the Zodiac killer? Why not pick up a phone and call the police? If you don't know the number, it's 911. It's a little bit easy. I can tell it to you now. Why not just do that? Or why not kick the guy's ass or something? Like, I mean, beat him to a pulp. I mean, you'll go to jail, but so will he, if it's actually true. So I don't believe that event actually happened. Why did Don Cheney, why is the story there? I don't know. I just don't know.
Well, and to be fair, Allen was supposed to be a pretty strong, tough guy that had a rumor for, getting in fights and being a bit of a brawler. So maybe Cheney was afraid of him, and he thought it would be maybe more of a payback to get him in trouble with the police. But again, who knows? Yeah,
I agree with both points. I agree with Morf there, and I know Drew has covered that on the Zodcast, and you've covered on your show as well, Ned. So yeah, I'm in the same boat as you guys. I agree on that one. One thing I don't agree with is if we could do a little bit of graysmithing, to use Drew's term. Zodiac was the first book about the case that I read personally, and at some point he says that Arthur Lee Allen is attacked by 4 Marines or 4 or 5 Marines and beats up all 4 of them. I don't believe that at all. It doesn't, and also, isn't this some guy with bad feet with gout that can't even really walk really good, but he can beat up 4 Marines? So I don't know how accurate the whole Arthur Lee Allen brawler thing was, but that part really didn't make much sense to me. Didn't seem too realistic. Seemed like Graysmith was sensationalizing that one, in my opinion.
Yeah, and again, the movie magic of capturing some of that stuff, they didn't talk about necessarily all of that stuff in the movie, but to make his ultimate suspect look scarier and tougher and things like that, it may have been stuff that he did add to sort of build on that character and make him look more threatening.
Yeah, and since we're on this subject, I just want to revisit the Bob Vaughn basement and Rick Marshall scene of the floorboards squeaking above him. I mean, how that's shot like a horror scene, I really like that. But at no point ever do we see Graysmith go to a gun store and purchase a firearm. So if you are a non-law enforcement, non-self defense trained person hunting for the Zodiac killer who just shot 4 or 5 people in cold blood randomly, one of which downtown in a major city. Did Graysmith at every point have a gun and bring it with him to the Bob Vaughn basement? He thinks like Rick Marshall's upstairs and might be the Zodiac killer, and he doesn't have any way to defend himself. And also, everyone knows Graysmith and like Avery are going around researching this, including the Zodiac himself, because he obviously reads the newspaper, right? So that was one thing that was a little bit like, dude, you're trying to hunt a serial killer, and you might not even have any way to like protect yourself if you find him. I guess allegedly in the movie he does come face to face with him in the climax scene, right? So that kind of threw me off, like.
Yeah, it's sort of interesting to pick out what's accurate. Now, I actually heard from someone. I talked to someone. It's been quite a while, so I don't remember exactly who it was, but the way it was relayed to me, that scene where he went to Vaughn's basement was true. There was someone it seemed, in his opinion, there was someone walking around upstairs, even though no one was supposed to be there. So that scene supposedly really happened the way it's shown in the movie.
Yeah, I read that as well.
Yeah, and it does add some creepiness to it, but you're right if you're worried about all the stuff and all these potential dangerous people that you're going to interview and stuff, why not, get some kind of protection or bring someone with you at the very least.
Again, okay, so let's say that was Rick or ALA or the Zodiac, and he comes downstairs for a chat. What was Graysmith going to do then? He was going to try to talk him down, a guy that just killed people, called the cops and told on himself, and then wrote letters to tell everyone? It doesn't seem like it would have worked, So, like,
yeah.
Another thing is, the pacing. So one thing I like about is David Fincher's deliberate pacing of, how frustrating the case was and not finding the perpetrator of the crimes and all that stuff. It comes across really well. But again, in some places, the pacing, it just seems a bit off of this almost 3-hour movie. In particular, the America Pyramid, how they have the little montage to represent the decades going by. Very interesting scene. I like the way it looks, but I'm not sure that's 100% necessary to, a crime mystery film that's almost in excess of 3 hours. It just seems that there were certain things that's like, okay, that's a good way to represent the passage of time. But again, some of this stuff I think could have just been cut out because it really wasn't relevant to the case or the story, in my opinion, So.
Yeah. I get why they did that, because it's depicting a passage of time and people are changing. They're going through these different events in their life. People are getting, Graysmith and Avery are going through these relationship problems. And when you see them again, they're sort of on their own. And so it sort of helps demonstrate that time has gone by. And I sort of get why they did it. But in the grand scheme of things, it's probably something they didn't need to do.
Agreed. How about Ned? You got anything on that, Ned?
Oh, yes. First, you said the word graysmithing a few minutes ago, coined by Drew Dehan. We need to use that word more frequently. We just need to put that in the English language, graysmithing. Like putting two ideas together where one is true and one is false, but you splice them together, people can't tell. Awesome. Yeah. But about Robert Graysmith, I've heard of him, is that he was a wannabe detective. He's not a real detective. As you said, he's a cartoonist. He's a production assistant at the Chronicle. He does things like work with some cameras as well in the dark rooms. But he was a wannabe detective, and he also spent his life in the newspaper world. I heard, not the most reliable source in the world, someone tells you, right? But that when he was like 12 and 13, he was working on a military base at the Tachikawa Marauder as, working at a newspaper at the age of 12 or 13. So he spent a lot of his life investigating things. And even when he's not doing that, like in the Fincher film, he's talking to the investigators. He's talking to the reporters, like Paul Avery. As you said, they're practically portrayed as best friends. And so would he have carried a gun? I have no idea. That's a good question. Did Graysmith ever carry a gun with him when he was investigating this? Or what's his deal? Good question, though.
Yeah, I don't think he ever talked about it in the book, at least not that I recall. Which is, again, I just, if you're making this big thing that you work at the the paper where the Zodiac is sending pieces of victims' clothing and letters and stuff, he's already obviously pretty familiar with everybody working there as he was with Avery. So it seems like an extreme personal risk. One thing I do like about is how Ruffalo spent time with Tashi to get the character down. That was pretty cool. I know there's obviously other characters based on Tashi, such as Bullet, and they reference, the whole Bullet McQueen thing in the film as well in the dialogue, which was a cool little Easter egg, as Morf said.
Yeah, that's cool that they do, and I guess it's common with actors to do that on a lot of movies, but to do it in this case is interesting. I talked to Ken Narlow, and he said, "Oh, the guy that played me was really good, but he was like 20 pounds heavier than I was." He got hung up on it. He says I was in really good shape back at that age. That guy was like 20 pounds heavier than me.
Yeah, that's cool. I mean, it's mostly about the performance, Mr. Narlow. You know what I mean? We're not gonna get totally thrown off like, hey, this guy's weight is off, unless it's the Zodiac, and who could really pin that anyway. You know what I mean? So I know there's you cover a lot of that on your channel, Ned.
Oh, sure, yeah. I mean, Robert Graysmith didn't look exactly like Jake Gyllenhaal, but I mean, I doubt Graysmith was complaining too much.
Yeah, no. I mean, we know a big part of the Graysmith book was the attention. Again, I think it's just tough that they chose to follow the Zodiac book so much. You know what I mean? I would have liked to just a little bit more, stay on the case directly. But again, it is a movie. It does have to have a story, as Morf said. It is Hollywood at the end of the day. It's not a documentary. So, but again, I think the accurate parts are like amazing. It's just some of those parts that aren't quite accurate that aren't quite my favorite parts. But the trivia was wild. Just learning a lot of stuff about the trivia and how they flew in the trees and stuff, like Morf said. Like that was crazy. I never heard of any movie doing that. I mean, I'm sure it happens, but I just had never heard of that.
Yeah, you'd think that they would go to like a scene that looked very familiar, but had trees standing there. But I guess if you want to be genuine and be in the exact spot and sort of capture that, the attention of, hey, we're filming in the spot where this happened, let's make this scene seem real, then maybe you do go through those extremes to bring in the trees and stuff. Yeah, for sure.
The IMDb trivia has some cool stuff. Apparently, the producers hired a private investigator to track down Mike Michaud. I'm sure you knew about that, Morf.
Yeah, he's a guy that's bounced around and skipped around quite a bit, so it doesn't surprise me they needed to bring one in.
Absolutely. But what else you got, Ned? Any other things you like? Any gripes you don't like? Let us know what you think.
Well, first, I hadn't heard that before, that they hired a private investigator to find Mike Michaud. Definitely not the first time, because he was on Geraldo Rivera's TV show back in the 90s, when it's actually Pam Suennen, Pam Huckabee, Darlene Ferrin's sister, is interviewing him, but he doesn't know that the camera's there. She's like, tell me the truth, what really happened to my sister? And if he knows something, he didn't share it, even though he didn't know he was being filmed. And Mike Michaud, of course, the victim from the Blue Rock Springs shooting, he's a very suspicious character, because when he's shot, he's wearing 3 layers of clothes. It's actually 5 shirts and 3 pairs of pants. And he said he did it because he wanted to hide how skinny he was, but he was a little insecure about his skinny body. But then there's the other theory that he was actually a cat burglar, and he did that because you break into somebody's house, you steal their stuff, you run around the corner, you take off a layer of clothes, and the witness description will change. No, I didn't see anybody run by in blue jeans and a red shirt, because he's now wearing something else. Morf, you must have some things like about Mike Michaud. Like, do you think he's a trustworthy guy? Do you think he was a local criminal? Or what do you think about him?
It's hard for me to say. I don't know. He didn't have like a criminal record back then. He didn't have. He seemed like a normal 19-year-old kid. Wasn't perfect. Wasn't a huge career criminal by that point or anything, and seemed to have feelings for Darlene and seemed to be drawn to her. And if you contrast that to the 2007 documentary, where there's something going on with him, where he's either got mental illness or physical illness or substance abuse going on. He's got something going on. I'm not a professional, so I don't know what it is, but it's plain to see that he's got something going on that he's during the discussion. So, it goes back to even in the police reports. I was having an online discussion with someone sort of debating details, and they're like, "Oh, you trust anything Mike Mageau says after seeing that video?" And I was like, "No, I don't from 2007 in that video, but I did in the 1969 police reports that he gave statements a day or two after his attack. I trust those. I don't trust anything he says now because of what's going on with him, either in his mind or with his abuse, substance abuse, or whatever's going on. I don't want to accuse him of anything. I'm not a professional, but I think it's clear to see that there's something going on with him in that documentary that's he's suffering from something."
Absolutely. So you both brought up excellent points there that I want to cover. So I'm glad you brought up the multiple shirts and pants thing, Ned. I've heard Horan's theory on that, and so I'm just wondering, Morph, did you ever hear anything on why this guy is dressed like this on July 4th, other than he's self-conscious about his skinny body type? Because it does seem rather peculiar.
I think what Ned said could be, a explanation. I've heard that some people theorize that he thought something was going to happen that night, like a knife fight or something, and having all those extra clothes on might help keep him from getting stabbed or maybe even getting shot. And it sounds stupid, but it's definitely weird that someone would be wearing that many clothes on a hot summer night.
Yep.
And again, I don't know if he had intentions. Maybe he was there for a drug deal. Who knows? And maybe he didn't want to tell everything to police that he was doing in his life at that time.
Yep.
But I don't think it makes him any less reliable as far as giving details about the person that shot him. He's pretty he stuck to his story, didn't change it. He gave specific details and didn't beat around the bush. It's not till 2007, all these years later, that he started making all these crazy, weird stories in that documentary. But early on, his statements were all pretty concise and to the point.
I totally agree. So, given that we're on him, let's go to the last film in his scene is the Mageau character's return and pointing at the suspect pictures in the lineup, and we have the very large face description from the night, and then I'd like to get your input on this more from him fingering Alan as the person who shot him, and that's like 1990 or something. It's years later, right? So people have said that he was kind of led into, hey, is it this guy? Say it's this guy. Do you think he was kind of pushed into the picture, or what did you think?
Well, I know the detective the officer that questioned him, George Bauer, was high on Alan as Zodiac. So I wasn't there. I don't know what happened, but
right.
And then again, we're talking about 20-something years later. To me, I'm someone that believes in what was said right at the time something happened. What's documented in reports, not 3 months later, 3 years later, 30 years later. I want to know what's fresh in someone's mind. So I go back and look at the reports right from that time. But somebody says, 30 years, 40 years later in a documentary, just simply, it sounds like half the time like it's bullshit. Because if you look at what Falk said all these crazy things that he never said in any report. In fact, he never filed a report. He sent a memo a month later after the fact, when Stein was shot. But then later on, in the documentary, he's suddenly adding things. Oh, I saw Zodiac go up the steps to this address, and then he says the address, and they bleep it out. Officer Collins supposedly said all this information that Cecilia told him that he never put in any police report. Yet here he is relaying this information 40 years later, and they even called him out and said, "Why didn't you put that in a report?" He goes, "I just didn't think of it." Well, guess what? It makes you look really suspicious, and I don't believe you after all these years. You didn't put it in a report right when it was fresh, when it happened. I'm not going to believe you 40 years later when you're suddenly ad-libbing and making up stuff to look good on camera.
Well, for sure. I mean, if it's me doing it, it's understandable, but that was your job to put it in a report, dude. So it's like a little bit different, when it's your specification.
Yeah, if it's that important and you're talking about what somebody looked like, and you might be able to shed some light on their height or what the dying witness told you, you're going to put that in a report. You're not going to say, "Oh, I forgot to do it. It slipped my mind." I mean, it's it just 40 years later to come out with that stuff, I just don't buy it.
Yeah, totally. So yeah, I mentioned this earlier. The murder victims' costumes were meticulously recreated from forensic evidence that was lent to the production. So I mean, that's the thing about this, guys, is as Morf was saying, the production did get a lot of details on the case, which are show. You know, a lot of it is kind of like almost Easter egg stuff that you might not know that they didn't highlight on, but there is a lot of really cool, kind of accurate for the time, the errors type stuff. Any other thoughts you guys have on, you know, what you like, what you didn't like?
Yeah, I have something though, but it's about just talking about the statements that people were making, because Officer Falk, as Morph was just talking about, what contributed to the composite sketch where he saw the Zodiac kill. He's one of the few people who possibly, to the best of our knowledge, may have actually seen the Zodiac killer. And I'll share some of this on BBOR tomorrow, but Mike Rodelli just shared a message with me about how Officer Falk was never interviewed for Robert Graysmith's book, and or specifically it says Graysmith did not speak to him. In fact, Falk said that he contacted Graysmith and asked why he didn't interview him. And Graysmith said, "Well, I'm writing a second book, and I'll interview you for that." Then Falk was left scratching his head when the second book came out, and Graysmith didn't interview him for that one either. I just think that's really interesting that he would include so many people into the book, but not interview one of the guys who's actually seen the Zodiac. And I was just reading a message from Mike Rodelli there.
Yeah, to me, that speaks to Falk not being that trustworthy, because again, getting back to someone that's supposed to put stuff in a report, if you have a dispatch that you're looking for a black male, and then you drive by and you see a stocky white guy walking down the street, then a couple seconds later they fix the description and you say, "Oh, that was the guy that we just drove by," you think you would come forward with that information right away and say, "Look, I know the wrong description was put out, but I just saw that guy. We just passed him. Here's what he looked like. Let's get a sketch artist." He didn't come forward for a month or 6 weeks until after the sketch was put out, or after the murders. So I just don't buy it. I think he may have been someone that was seeking attention. And he's describing Zodiac, but he's describing what's basically in that wanted poster. I still have doubts about whether he even passed him, because he didn't put that into a report early, because later on he started making up oddball stuff about it. You know, what if that's your job and you're at the scene of a murder where you just passed someone on the street, that once they corrected the bolo, then you would say, "Look, I just passed him. Here's what he looks like," and then put that in a report. He never did that. So to me, that fits right in with some of the other people that didn't put stuff in reports, and then 40 years later, they want you to believe all of a sudden that they saw this stuff.
Okay, wow, that's good.
Oh, yeah, sorry, Ross, but Morph, that begs the question then, what kind of character is Falk then? Is he a bad actor, or is he someone who just did some shoddy workmanship and wasn't thinking right, or like what's the motivation to be so uncooperative?
You mean for Falk?
Yeah, for all those things that you just said about basically not doing his.
I don't know what it would be. Either to me, it's one of two things. It's either doing a bad job or wanting some kind of attention and using the Zodiac case to get the attention. Because you either did a bad job, didn't do your job right, and didn't put the stuff in a report, which should have been standard to do, or you later on said, "How can I inject myself into this position here? How can I insert myself into the case and get some attention?" Well, I know. I'll say I saw this guy that they just put a sketch out of, and say I saw him. We passed him. That's what I think happened. It was one of those two things.
Does that mean you don't think the Falk sighting is credible at all, or you think it didn't happen, or what?
I just know that the sketches aren't based on Falk's descriptions, and I'm when I talk about those sketches, when I talk about that appearance there, I'm talking about the people that put their stuff into a report right away, and I'm not going by what someone put forward weeks or years later.
Okay, you guys just go ahead, Ned.
No, I said okay. No, he answered.
You guys just totally melted my brain with that commentary right there, because I was totally unprepared for that. I had always thought that this Falk thing was like a gospel that just everybody took for 100% accurate. I had no idea, Morf, that there was any doubt there or any of this him changing his statement. Now, going on that, after Falk sees the first composite sketch, doesn't he give that feedback for them to do the updated composite of adding the widow's peak and the thicker lips and stuff? I thought they made those those adjustments based off Falk.
No, that's not correct.
Wow. Okay.
I don't have the composites in front of me right now, but the composites, I want to say they were done 3 days apart. I think they changed the composite to the different version, to the older version, whatever you want to call it, 3 days later. And both of them were well before Falk came out with that memo that he sent.
Wow. That is quite wild, man. That was an interesting development for me. I was not quite ready for that. Well, that being said, Morf, is it true what Ned has covered over on BlackBox, that you've been told to limit information on your suspect that you've been covered recently by law enforcement? Is that accurate?
Yeah, I made the choice on some discussions I had with them not to promote him on my site, not to mention his name, not to put anything out there that would be sure to put his identity out there. Now, before I was given this feedback to take the stuff down, that it would be in the best interest to remove it, it was literally on my site for hours. I wouldn't even say a day. I think it was on there for less than a day. And by the time I took it down, I think some people had taken it and posted it in different spots. And there's people on there now making claims that, they're putting out his name incorrectly. It's not even his right name. They're putting out there, they're saying things like his widow's house just got raided or just got searched by police. And it's all complete nonsense. I don't believe any of this stuff is that's being reported on Reddit and places like that is entirely accurate.
That is interesting stuff. You have anything on those recent developments, Ned?
I have not heard anything about the widow's house being raided. As Morf says, it's probably not true. Of course, we're talking about suspect McDuff now, and I'll give Morf credit for this. After reading the police report after the Blue Rock Springs shooting, where Mike Mageau says the guy's about 5'8", and he couldn't make out any details of his facial features other than his face was really big, Morf suspect McDuff seems to match that description, and of course Morf has a connection. Morf has found a connection between McDuff and the phone used after Blue Rock Springs. Okay, of course I'm not 100% sold, but I'll give him that. No, I haven't heard anything about his home being raided or his widow's home being raided. Is that what they were saying, Morf?
Yeah, there was a Reddit poster named Miracle2_777 that posted some
Beautiful
stuff.
name.
They even put up a doctored composite sketch of my suspect. It's like his actual photo, but they did some kind of Photoshop work with his hairline to make it look more like the Zodiac poster. And then he made the claims that his widow's house has been searched, and they took some stuff that might yield his DNA. And it's completely BS. And luckily a Reddit moderator and people at Tom Waite's site took that stuff down, because as much as I believe that he's Zodiac, and I'm 100% confident he's a Zodiac, I don't want stuff being put out there trying to sell him and trying to make him look like a better suspect. But people are out there doing that, putting out false information and stuff like that. And I think it's pretty stupid and irresponsible to do that.
It's terrible. Well, it really is, because it's like you, as you said, someone's actually putting in the effort to doctor a photo just to mislead people, or they're not, making a mistake and saying a fact that they thought was true, but it turns out it's false. They would be blatantly lying, saying, yeah, I know for a fact his house got raided. I know for a fact that they're getting his DNA. I mean, someone is consciously deceiving people on purpose or for whatever reason. It's terrible.
Yeah, I think it's someone that's an attention seeker and is sort of just capitalizing on the recent discussion of this person. I don't think police are going to share that information with anyone. Well, I know he's being looked at. I don't know how fast they're looking at. I don't know what extent they're looking at him. I don't know how quickly they're going to move on stuff. But for this person to claim that they have this inside information, and when called out on it, to just say I can't disclose my sources. Well, I could say that I know the world's going to end in 3 days, but I can't disclose how I know it. I mean, I can make any kind of claim I want, and just try and pass it off. But luckily, again, the people at Tom's site and the people at Reddit yanked this stuff down pretty quickly, so it didn't really gain any traction. But it's when they do go through that much trouble to make something like that happen, I assume they're going to try and continue to do that, which is unfortunate.
So I guess the internet would go insane and lose their minds, Morph, if I didn't ask you while I have you, and as well as all your fans that follow your work. How does that impact how you proceed forward on your research project? Are you able to? Do you have an idea how you're going to present your information when you're ready? Do you have to worry about getting ahead of law enforcement on that, or how do you going to proceed with your research?
No, I've given law enforcement enough stuff to be able to start an investigation and for them to know, there's prints for this individual out there someplace. They just have to be able to find them. I think they should be able to find them. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure they're working on DNA behind the scenes. Here's someone that they has living relatives. So I've also been working on a family tree project to present them with everyone in his tree. So there's a lot of stuff I can already have given them and can continue to give them, but I think they have enough at this point. But at the same time, I'm going to keep digging, going to keep looking. Going back to the Zodiac movie, this is someone who owned the book that was in the bar scene when Robert Graysmith holds up David Kahn's The Code Breakers. Here's the guy that owned that very book, owned not one copy but 2 copies of it because he liked it so much.
That's interesting.
So it's just a Zodiac movie tie-in that's the book in the movie that he holds up. But it's again, I'm confident this is the right guy, and I've never said that about any suspect before, so I'm going to stake my reputation on it. I'm either going to be right or I'm going to be wrong, but time will tell.
But as far as you presenting it on your website and all that, do you need to hold off for behind the scenes, reasons? I assume that you just can't go all the way in and put enough stuff's coming out about him that his name is known to many already, but there's, it's not widely being put out there. So until it's widely out there all over the place, I'll probably not put it out there. But again, it won't stop law enforcement from doing what they need to do, even if his name goes out there at this point. They have what they need to tie him to Zodiac case if they can. So it's just a question of them doing that work, and I don't know how long that's going to take. Sure. It's understandable. It makes sense. Well, perfect time to bring in Ned. Ned, since you are the all suspect deep dive, master of your channel, you're still waiting to see some more information from Morf here, I take it, on this one?
First, to share some pleasant things. I've done some interviews recently. As I said, I was talking to Mike Rodelli about his suspect Shel Cavale, and I did interview Thomas Henry Horan talking about his suspect Hal Snook. And I find that with those guys who have published a lot of material about their suspects, these people are incredible. Even somebody like Richard Gaikowski, you learn about how he's a journalist, a traveling battered typewriter of Dick Gaikowski, and all the things that he did. And you learn that some people have incredible stories. First, I'm waiting to find out if I can find something about Morf's suspect, McDuff. What's the incredible story that McDuff is holding? Because, I just learned about McDuff maybe 6 months ago, whenever Morf went somewhat public about this, or this came about. So I don't know that much about him other than the info that Morf has shared. Now, are you talking about how I said very clearly on my channel, do I think Morf has found the Zodiac killer? No. well, that will mean that we now have a fork in the road, and either Morph will be right and I will be wrong, or I will be right and he will be wrong. So time will tell, but I will say very clearly, I will accept the DNA evidence, the fingerprints, if anything like that happens, like there's a forensic decision, the FBI signs off and says, hey, this is the guy, no matter who it is, even if it's a suspect that I think is absolutely at the bottom that I've put in my debunking series, I'll accept that. But yeah, was there a specific question you had, Ross?
Just your general thoughts on, the direction it was going in.
Well, the direction is I'm waiting. I think that McDuff's fingerprints should be very easily available because Morph, he was a state employee, right?
Yeah, he worked for the Department of Corrections, and for that job, he would have needed prints on file. Now,
Absolutely.
the thing is, back then, when he got his job in early 1971, there wasn't some computer database that all this stuff went into. It likely was collected, checked, and then put in a filing cabinet someplace. So, to that point, where that filing cabinet is with these prints at that point, how easy that is to get, that I don't know how easy that is or where they should look, or that's their job, not mine. They're going to have to figure that out. But if they're doing DNA, like I think they are behind the scenes and they're going to go genealogy route like they have in so many cases, then I know that he has living relatives that he can be looked into for their DNA to see if it matches his.
Well, absolutely, because you wouldn't be trying to find an unknown person. I mean, talking about McDuff, like they know who he is and they can easily identify his relatives. But Morph, I think I forgot to ask you once, did he ever have any children, or what exactly was his stance on
that? He had no children.
Okay. I could see that lining up with the Zodiac, actually, because I don't know why, I could go either way. Maybe I could go either way on that one, to be honest. It's just something that I was curious about because you were talking about his widow, but like, let's see.
Yeah, so I'm fully confident in Morph's research on this because I know about 1% of the information of the cases he does. But if we could just go into a rabbit hole sideline of Kathleen Johns real quick, isn't the whole thing with her, if that was indeed the Zodiac, children's clothing in the car, and people have immediately jumped to the conclusion that because there was children's clothing in that car when he gave her the ride, that the Zodiac definitely have children, because I see a whole lot of that at times. I'm just wondering if either one of you can debunk that, particularly you, Morf.
Yeah, I don't think there's any reason to believe that she was abducted by Zodiac. The Zodiac was never confirmed to have abducted anyone in any of his known confirmed attacks. So that does not fit with his MO. And there were a lot of bad people going around California at that time. So to me, there's nothing that ties her case to Zodiac. I sometimes flip-flop on whether I think something really happened or I tend to believe something did happen to her, because I don't know why she would make that up. But I just don't think there's anything to make that be linked to Zodiac, because I just don't see anything there that matches Zodiac.
Understood. Where you at on it, Ned?
I do not believe the Kathleen Johns incident was committed by the Zodiac killer for a very similar reason that Morph said. The Zodiac is mostly hands-off with the victims. I mean, we don't know everything that happened at Lake Herman Road, but it seems like firing some gunshots, disappearing. Blue Rock Springs, definitely. Yep. Approaching the car, blinding people with a flashlight, then just firing a gun and disappearing. And Lake Berryessa, the Zodiac didn't do anything, didn't stab the victims until they were tied up. Their hands are tied to their feet, and they are defenseless. This whole thing about luring someone into a vehicle, as Morph said, an abduction, which doesn't seem to fit the canonical crimes. Instead, you have somebody who is kind of cowardly trying to kill people, not even successful all the time, and then he just kind of scurries away. The one exception might be the Paul Stein murder, where there's an interesting debate about the Stein murder because Tahoe 27 said it's the simplest crime. He murdered a taxi driver. Then there was the Thomas Warren side saying the Stein murder shows the most criminal awareness, because this person knew how a crime scene was going to be investigated, and they knew how to leave the scene without leaving physical evidence behind and getting blood on their clothes. I mean, maybe. I mean, again, I can't speculate too much. With the Kathleen Johnson incident, it's so personal, it's so intimate. And not to mention, there's a baby present, right? I forget how old the child was, maybe Morf knows, but the Zodiac also did nothing with children. So I don't think the Zodiac committed that crime.
Absolutely. How about the Tim Holt comic book wheel by knife, by fire, by gun, by rope? Does lighting her car on fire after the incident, does that qualify for by fire, or are you guys totally out on that one?
Yeah, I sort of don't know. Again, it could be something him trying to make himself look like he's connected to that crime or some other crime with fire in it.
Right.
I don't know. But just going back to her crime in general, I just don't think it's connected. And there's a lot of crimes going around California during that time that people could pin on him and did pin on him. And I sort of wonder, if he just tried to capitalize on some of that stuff, and people 50 years later are still trying to connect him to these cases.
Yeah, makes perfect sense. Well, both of these gentlemen have been super generous with their time. So the way we do reviews here on Paradigm Review Show, guys, is we do out of 10 rating. So if either you guys would like to do your 1 out of 10 rating, or however you rate the film, we can get into our final conclusion here. If you want to give your rating of the film, Morf, you've seen it many times more than me.
I'm going to give it a 10. Although I don't agree with some of the details that Graysmith presented, and I think a lot of them went towards his suspect, and the second half of the movie, like we talked about, really focuses on his suspect. I think the movie overall is very well done and very something that I would highly recommend. Again, I'm a Fincher fan. The way he shoots movies, the atmosphere he makes for the films, all of that stuff is there in this movie, and it's just it's a very fascinating story to see on film, and he did it very well. So I'm going to give it 10 out of 10.
I agree with most of that. Where we at on it, Ned? What'd you think?
Out of 10, I would give it an 8, because firstly, I think that this kind of set the gold standard for Zodiac killer movies. And if there is ever another Zodiac killer movie, it's going to be like, well, is it better or worse than David Fincher's Zodiac? And I said some critical things about parts of it before, but what I have to remember is that this is a meta-narrative. It's the story of how a story was written. It's the story of Graysmith writing his 1986 book, Zodiac. And I don't know about you guys, but when I first saw them putting out the Zodiac books in the bookstore, like in the Fincher film, I was like, wow, that is so much more badass of a cover than I would have expected for the Jake Gyllenhaal character to have come up with. Because, well, I mean, Robert Graysmith on film via Jake Gyllenhaal definitely wasn't a badass. And as you said, why is he trying to confront serial killers with no gun? What's he going to do? But, well, he doesn't come across as a tough guy. Then you look at that book, Zodiac. I was like, it's kind of cool. Anyway, I give it an 8.
For sure. Now, I'm so glad you brought that up, because as Morf and I were talking about some of the Easter eggs and stuff, some of those close-up shots of the Zodiac book cover, is just like the product placement is like, okay, we get it. Most of us know this movie is based on that book, but like if you didn't know before watching it, those close-up scenes that couldn't have got any closer to the book cover now show you, like, yes, Zodiac by Robert Graysmith. Obviously, this is the source material for the movie. I think I'm right in between you guys. I gave it a 9 out of 10. It currently has a 7.7 on IMDb. I think it could probably be a little bit higher than that. But a lot of people were, that I think maybe that don't know the case, were saying that like this wasn't their favorite Fincher movie and stuff like that. Some of the stuff we said about the pacing of how it's deliberately a frustratingly paced movie, that's due to the fact because it's replicating the frustrating pace of the case of them chasing this killer that they can't catch up with. You know what I mean? I think that came across very good on screen. Like we said, highlight scenes, Lake Berryessa, the canonical crimes, things like that. Even the Paul Stein sequence is pretty interesting. So there's a lot of good stuff in there. I will say it's probably a little bit too long, you know what I mean? Especially if you're going to revisit it. I think they could have cut it down a little bit. Granted, you're talking about a story that spans several years, so it makes some sense. But yeah, if you guys haven't seen it, I would say definitely check out Zodiac. David Fincher. The filmmaking is amazing. The production, as Morf said, and the detail into the costume and props on set and stuff like that. The Halloween card, the pieces of Paul Stein shirts, all that stuff is done geniusly. So there's a lot of great things about it. Again, it does follow Graysmith very closely. The only thing that I would have liked to see more is just like some of these other suspects, like, no really mention of Kane whatsoever. Not that I think he's the Zodiac, but I would have liked to have seen them at least like debunk some of these people. I think that would have helped to newcomers to the case as far as understanding it. But any final thoughts from either of you gentlemen?
Well, I know you talked about things that were missing from the movie, things we'd like to see in the movie.
Yep.
What I'm looking forward to is when the case is solved, seeing the movie that comes out then, knowing to be able to backtrack and put information in about who the person was, and sort of answer some of the questions that have been unanswered. That will be a movie that I'll like to see, the way that it was solved and the backstory of how things happened.
That's a great point. And if Morf ends up being right on his suspect, if Hollywood wants to contact me and involving in that filmmaking, that would be excellent. I'll put you guys right in touch with Morf. Anything else, Ned? Shameless self-promotion.
Yeah, a little bit, but it's all good, right? No, one guy left a comment on my challenge question about what kind of Zodiac movie you want to see. And he said he wanted to see the trial of Arthur Lee Allen. Like, what would have happened if it had gone to trial? And the reason why that's an acceptable answer is, if it's a movie, you have the ability to do like a what if. Quentin Tarantino loves doing these things nowadays, like giving history different endings and so on.
Yeah.
And it wouldn't be presented like graysmithing, as we said, where you're trying to convince people that this is nonfiction. You could do something like that, and I'm curious to know if that will happen in the future, that somebody's going to make a Zodiac killer film that's going to have kind of a what-if storyline, like the trial of Arthur Lee Allen, or we talked about some other people. You just said Lawrence Kane or Gareth Penn, like if they were incorporated in the mystery in a different way, where you're not trying to make people think it's literal history, it's just a creative way of exploring the substance material. So I'm curious to know what Hollywood's going to be doing.
Man, that was an interesting point. I would love to see Tarantino's take on the Zodiac the way he did, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood with the Manson family. So I think Tarantino is basically done now. But yeah, that's an interesting concept that Ned just brought up there. That could be. I'm really surprised there hasn't been some sort of epic Tashi biopic, given that you have Bullet. You have him being, Dirty Harry Callahan's inspiration and all the things they've made that are already kind of based on Tashi and the Zodiac, you know what I mean? But I think Ruffalo did good in this with his Tashi depiction. Actually, real quick, what did you guys think of the Sherwood Morrill character of him, being this kind of retired alcoholic in the film, and then also Melvin Belli, both of their depictions in the film?
I thought they were both well done. I'm a big fan of I can't think of the guy's name that played Melvin Belli, but he's been in quite a lot of movies, and he's been really good in them.
It's Brian Cox.
Brian Cox, yeah. So he really put his. He didn't have a lot of scenes, and maybe he was in the movie for about 10 minutes, 15 minutes tops. Mm-hmm. But he really put an effort in for his scenes to put his acting chops in there.
Yeah, I'd agree. You got anything on either of those, Ned?
Well, I can't comment too much on the Melvin Belli scenes, mostly because I'm not extremely familiar with Melvin Belli outside of the little bit that I've seen of him in the Zodiac world. As I understand, he was a much more prolific attorney or like a very famous attorney. That's why the Zodiac wanted to talk to him. And the Zodiac also wanted to contact F. Lee Bailey, who would go on to be an attorney in the O.J. Simpson trial. Mm-hmm. That's for sure. Well, you said they depicted him as kind of an older, kind of an alcoholic. Was that the word you said?
Yeah, that was Sherwood Morrow, right? He was, you know, well, I guess they did it to him and Avery, but yeah, they were both basically drinking in every scene in the film that they were in.
Hey, so about Morrow, he is a guy that people go back and forth on in real life. They think
Yeah.
that he's a brilliant handwriting expert. Then they try to say that maybe he doesn't have the best credibility, or maybe he was genuinely mistaken when he was trying to say that this stuff's the Zodiac killer, particularly the connections to Sherry Jo Bates and all the writing that has been found after the Bates murders. So
Yeah.
I think that Sherwood Morrow is a very on-the-fence character, period. Movie, real life. And it also goes to show us handwriting analysis is not perfect science. Even people who are really good at it can't always identify handwriting. So that's going to, I mean, that's going to make it so much more difficult to find out who actually wrote those letters, who actually wrote the ciphers, who wrote the thing on the car door at Lake Berryessa, because we're going to have to use something better than handwriting analysis.
Yeah, that was a great point, Ned. Real quick, Morf, just because the whole thing about handwriting analysis, that was essentially not a science at the time, right? Morrow was like the pioneer of that, and then we kind of catch him in the later years of this retired alcoholic. So, you know, then the recent development with Sherry Jo Bates, I'm sure you're going to mention that, Morf.
Yeah, I mean, the science of handwriting was not really science; it was opinion. It was. Now, don't get me wrong. I think Sherwood Morrow was at the top of his craft when it came to that, but I think in light of the recent Riverside findings, I don't know that we can call that an exact science. I know it's not physical evidence like DNA or fingerprints, and it's the last thing that should be called on towards solving a case. That being said, I think if DNA, fingerprint, stuff like that leads to a suspect and you just want to strengthen a case against them, then you can sort of grab someone's handwriting and say, okay, their DNA matches, their prints match. We found a bunch of their handwriting that matches too. It could just be one of the tools to help put the final nail in the coffin of who Zodiac was.
Absolutely. I agree. Well, let's go out on this final scene of John Carroll Lynch, who plays Arthur Lee Allen in the film. While I do not think that it was Arthur Lee Allen in any way, shape, or form as the Zodiac in the real case, I think this guy had an epic performance and he captured the role perfectly. You know what I mean? But how about this scene at the very end in the hardware store where Graysmith comes up to him like face to face, like, "Hey, do you need anything?" He's like, "Nah, I'm good," and he just stares at him. I thought in the book the way Graysmith said that went down was he just kind of hid in the back super far away and just like looked at him from afar, where in the movie they kind of have this like eye to eye, face to face square off. Did you guys have anything on that?
I think they probably just wanted to portray Graysmith's character as being braver and tougher than he actually was, and he, let's make him face to face, not hiding in the back, peeking from around a shelf. I think that would look kind of weird in the movie.
Exactly. How about you, Ned?
As far as John Carroll Lynch goes, he also did the show $1, which is available on Paramount Plus. I think it's a Paramount Plus original. You can only get it on that streaming service. That's really good. It's a murder mystery, but it's done in a very, very different way. I've never seen a murder mystery like that before. It's called $1. As far as him in the movie, I guess I thought that he didn't look 100% like the real life Arthur Lee Allen. Granted, we don't have an Arthur Lee Allen photocopy who could play that role, but I found that it was always convincing when he's doing any of his scenes that something seems like he's off. Like, "Oh, is it true that you're ambidextrous?" No, that's untrue. Like, just the way he's talking, it's like he's always hiding something. "Oh yeah, but about this you're asking about." I mean, if they had Graysmith hiding behind the shelves or something, that would just be like it just wouldn't sell the movie too well. And
That's true.
a couple times they're trying to make Robert Graysmith look much braver than he actually was, and probably Arthur Lee Allen just trying to make him look like the villain, which he seems like a very, very bad person overall. I mean, all the things that he actually did. But Zodiac Killer, I also don't believe that he was the Zodiac, much as you just said.
For sure. I mean, I would have loved to seen Graysmith hiding in the back and peeking around the corner, you know what I mean? But it's like, okay, you were coming up to the Zodiac, who's this supposed mathematical ciphering genius that works at a hardware store, and you're going to walk up to him face to face and, I guess, question that you know who he is, although without actually saying it out loud verbally, right? Like, dude, this guy's going to take one of the freaking mallets off the shelf and smash you in the face with it. And even if he thinks he's caught in that moment, you really think that he's not going to do something to you and run out the door just to escape, you know what I mean? So that's the ending I wanted, was to him to just like, you know, throw Graysmith through a window and like drive away in his car, you know what I mean? Because I felt like that would be way more realistic.
Well, and I think it builds on what he said to his wife when she was in the process of leaving him because he was so obsessed with the case. She says, what are you going to do? Arrest him? He goes, no, I need to look him in the eye. I need to know it's him. I need for him to know that I know it's him. And that's the final scene, is him looking in the eye. It's like he finally accomplished what he's been trying to do for this whole movie. So I think that's probably why they went that route.
Yeah, for sure, without a doubt. And as Ned was saying about the Arthur Lee Allen character's dialogue, will end on his final line of his interrogation scene with the police. Like, you know, I'm not the Zodiac, and if I was, you know, I certainly wouldn't tell you. You know, it doesn't get much more ominous than that, right? Ned is flat out telling the cops to their face, like, oh no, it's not me, but if it was, you know, like, so pretty ridiculous. But I think that's pretty much all I got for you, gentlemen, on this episode. That does it for the Zodiac 2007 review. It's a great film. You guys should just definitely check it out, whether you know the case or whether you just like crime, mystery, murder films. I think you guys would enjoy that one if you're a Fincher fan. Like, sub, share. We'll get these guys out of here one more time with the outros. Morf, you're at ZodiacKiller.net. You really put a good spook into me when you changed the website. I couldn't find the old one for a second. I was like, oh my God, is it gone? And then I realized you had a whole new site. So give them your links.
Yeah, I mean, if anyone old school is looking for ZodiacKillersite.com, if they go there, it'll redirect them to ZodiacKiller.net, which is the new site. So one of those sites. And again, if you want to find me on Twitter, you can find me at True Crime Guy, or my Zodiac specific handle is at ZodiacKillerNet. And of course, we have a Zodiac podcast, and that is at Podcast Zodiac.
Outstanding. Definitely make sure to follow Morf. He's on the ZodiacKiller.com forum as well. Hopefully get Morf back for a whole case and suspect deep dive soon. Ned, BlackBox Online Radio. Make sure to head right over to Ned's channel and subscribe. And the book is, let me see if I can give this a try without goofing it. It's Killer on a White Horse, Ned. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. Killer on a White Horse, available on Amazon.com. And the easiest way to find it is to go over to BlackBox Online Radio. I put a link to Amazon.com and all of the recent episodes. I'm also the host of the Zodiac Killer series, Interviews with the Experts, which Morph has appeared on. That's on the Zodiac Killer channel. Lots of things over there. And one more time, AstroPsych 400 was the astrology project. And yeah, that's about it for me.
Yeah, I would definitely try to get Ned back soon too. He covers, like I said, this guy deep dives every suspect on his channel, weekly shows, all that stuff. So head over there, drop him some subs and some likes. Morph, thank you very much. Appreciate you for joining us, and it was a great show, guys.
It was good talking with you guys.
Awesome, gents. Have a good afternoon.
Take care, bye.
Goodbye. All right, y'all. That was it. The Zodiac 2007 review. You can leave your comments below, like, sub, share. Make sure to follow Morph. Check out the Zodiac Speaking podcast. Check out Ned's channel, BlackBox Online Radio. Check out his book, Killer on a White Horse. Ned's a cool dude. He does great interviews over there on the Zodiac Killer channel. Check that out as well. And I think that does it for me. Thank you. Like, sub, share. Got some more stuff coming up soon. We got Zodiac Files Episode 3, The Murder Mystery of Cherry Joe Bates. I'm going to try to get Morph back for a deep dive case and suspect deep dive, and hopefully some more Zodiac Files interviews volumes coming soon, all next month for Zodtober. Thank you. Like, sub, share. Goodbye. Paradigm.